We are in a crisis and we need to do something now. I think we need to continue to raise awareness about the climate crisis and how it's impacting millions of people across the world. It takes quite a lot to be on a panel with people who are talking mostly about profit, talking mostly about business, and really leaving out the human perspective when it comes to the climate crisis. And I think we just need more people on the front lines to tell their stories, to tell their experiences, and also the experiences of their communities. In the world, we don't just have the existence of maybe the Western world or the global North. I think it's important to acknowledge that, we have the global North and also the global South. And many times in these conversations or in these panels, you realize that, there is a huge focus on what is happening in Western countries. And many times it's about the energy crisis, for example. And we do know there is an energy crisis, but there has been one for decades on the African continent, with over 600 million people, in sub-Saharan Africa with no access to basic electricity. So I think that it's really important to tell the stories and experiences of every community. I think that is what will complete the puzzle. We cannot leave anyone behind. For me, it was really, after realizing how climate change was affecting the people in Uganda, and that was after, reading about it and getting to understand the causes and also the impacts. And some of these impacts were already unfolding in Uganda, like the flooding and the landslides in the eastern part of the country. For me, that was the moment when I decided that I had to do something. And I remember, seeing the Fridays for Future strikes that was started by Greta from Sweden, and I was inspired to raise awareness about the environmental challenges in my country through organizing and also participating in climate strikes every Friday. We are still in a climate crisis. We are in an emergency, and I've often talked about what is happening, for example, in regions like the Horn of Africa, where millions of people are on the brink of starvation. I think it's not about, what we become or what places we get to. I think the message is what everyone should focus on, and that message is, we are in a crisis. You need to listen to the science, and you need to help the people that are on the front lines, the most vulnerable communities, if you are to achieve climate justice. There is a growing movement of different young people across the African continent that are speaking out and calling out for, phase out of, or calling out for no new fossil fuel investment, as the IEA has said that if we are to limit global temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius, we cannot have any new investments. So there are different young people that are organizing across the African continent. So I think that many people are really understanding the urgency of the problem and raising awareness, calling for climate justice. Climate finance, loss and damage has been a very huge topic as well. We saw at COP27 last year in Egypt the establishment of a loss and damage fund, but now we are calling for that fund to actually have real money that can help communities that are on the front lines of the climate crisis. So I would say different people are seeing and realizing the urgency, especially the young people, and they're speaking up. The most challenging thing that I've seen, especially in activism, I think it's really the disappointments and frustrations that come with, empty promises or empty words or empty commitments, because you end up realizing that promises will not stop the warming of the planet. Commitments will not stop the suffering of people. Only real action will do that. But when there is a gap between what is being said by the leaders and also what is done by the leaders, I think that is one of the frustrating moments in activism. I think it's really understanding how many of these issues are interconnected. Like I've talked about girls' education and women empowerment. It also comes to poverty eradication, because as families lose their homes, their farms, their businesses, they're being kept into poverty traps which continue for generations and generations. So you realize that we also can't talk about poverty eradication without having a conversation on the climate crisis, even hunger, achieving zero hunger. What we are seeing in the Horn of Africa, over 20 million people on the brink of starvation, people's farms being destroyed by floods or landslides. I think this even shows that we may never achieve zero hunger if people's farms are being destroyed and people don't have access to food, don't have access to water. So for me, it's just people understanding that we are in what I would call a puzzle, and if one piece of the puzzle is missing, it will never be complete. So I think we need to address all the issues as though we are addressing one. I don't think I'll specifically talk about what gives me hope, but what I can say is that when you are from communities that are on the front lines of the climate crisis, when you visited, places like Turkana in the Horn of Africa, and seeing how people are suffering and understood how climate change is more than weather, it's more than statistics, it's about the people, I think that you don't have, any other choice but to keep fighting for that future that is sustainable for all of us. But if I'm to talk about the issue of hope, I guess one of the places of hope is the fact that I am working with different people across the world. I think to just know that you're not alone and that you're millions of people that want this kind of world and believe that it's not only necessary but it's possible, I think that gives me hope.